Jake Morrison wiped the sweat from his face as he walked around the small research station. The morning sun on planet Kepler 442c was already getting hot. He had been living alone at Research Station Delta 7 for 3 months now. His job was to study the plants and animals on this new world that humans had found. The station was small but had everything Jake needed. There was a main building with his lab, sleeping area, and kitchen. Outside he had equipment to study the air, soil, and water. Tall purple trees grew all around the station. Their leaves made soft sounds in the wind. Jake checked his instruments like he did every morning. The air was clean. The soil was healthy. The water from the nearby stream was pure. This planet seemed perfect for human life, but Jake felt lonely. He talked to his computer sometimes just to hear a voice. As Jake walked to check the weather station, something moved in the purple bushes near the path. He stopped and looked carefully. A small head poked out from behind a large leaf. Jake held his breath. The creature was unlike anything in his files. It was about the size of a house cat, but it looked like the dragons from old Earth stories. It had smooth, shiny scales that changed color in the sunlight. They went from green to blue to silver as the creature moved. Small wings folded against its back. They looked too small for flying, but they were perfectly formed. The most surprising thing was its eyes. They were bright amber like liquid gold. When the creature looked at Jake, he felt like it was really seeing him. Not just looking, but understanding. Most animals on this planet ran away when they saw Jake. This one stayed and watched him with those intelligent eyes. Jake did not move. He did not want to scare the creature away. They looked at each other for what felt like a long time. The creature tilted its head, studying Jake. Then it made a soft sound like a mix between a bird's chirp and a cat's purr. Slowly, the creature stepped out from the bushes. It walked on 4 legs, but Jake could see it might be able to stand on 2. Its movements were graceful and careful. It kept its eyes on Jake the whole time. Jake wanted to take pictures, but his camera was in his pocket. Any quick movement might scare the creature, so he just watched and tried to remember every detail. The creature had tiny claws that looked sharp but not dangerous. Its tail was long and had a small fin at the end. The creature came closer. It stopped about 10 feet away from Jake. It sat down like a cat and wrapped its tail around its feet. Then it did something that made Jake's heart race. It pointed at Jake with one small claw, then pointed at itself. It was trying to communicate. Jake slowly pointed at himself and said, "Jake?" His voice was quiet and gentle. The creature made that purring, chirping sound again. It pointed at Jake again, then at itself. Jake understood. He pointed at the creature and said, "You." The creature's eyes got brighter. It made a series of musical sounds. Jake could not understand the sounds, but they seemed like a name. Jake decided to call the creature Pip because the sounds had a pip noise in them. Pip stood up and walked in a small circle. Then he looked at Jake's equipment. He seemed very interested in the weather station. Pip walked over to it and looked closely at the spinning parts that measured wind speed. He did not touch anything, but Jake could see he was thinking about how it worked. Jake was amazed. Most animals did not care about human tools, but Pip seemed to understand that the equipment had a purpose. This was not normal animal behavior. After a few minutes, Pip looked at the sky. The sun was getting higher and hotter. Pip looked back at Jake and made a different sound. It seemed like a goodbye. Then he walked back toward the purple trees. Jake wanted to follow, but something told him to wait. He watched as Pip disappeared into the thick forest. The whole meeting had lasted only about 15 minutes, but Jake felt like his life had changed. He went back to his station and wrote everything down in his computer. He described Pip's appearance, behavior, and the way he seemed to communicate. But Jake did not send the report to his bosses on Earth. Something told him to keep this secret for now. That night, Jake could not sleep well. He kept thinking about Pip's intelligent eyes and the way the creature had tried to communicate. Jake had studied many animals in his career. He had never met anything like Pip. Jake looked out his window at the purple forest. The 2 moons of Kepler 442c made the trees look silver and mysterious. Somewhere out there, Pip was probably sleeping. Jake wondered if Pip was thinking about their meeting too. The next morning, Jake hoped Pip would come back. He did his usual work, but he kept looking toward the bushes where Pip had appeared. Jake left some of his breakfast near the weather station. It was just fruit and bread, but maybe Pip would like it. Jake waited all day, but Pip did not return. When the sun went down, Jake felt disappointed. Maybe their meeting was just a one-time thing. Maybe Pip had decided humans were not interesting after all. But deep down, Jake felt like he would see those golden eyes again soon. 3 days passed before Pip came back. Jake was fixing a broken sensor when he heard that familiar purring chirping sound. He turned around and saw Pip sitting near the weather station, looking at the fruit Jake had left there. Pip sniffed the fruit carefully. He took a small bite, chewed it slowly, then made a happy sound. He ate the rest of the fruit and looked at Jake. His golden eyes seemed to say, "Thank you." Jake smiled and slowly walked to his supply box. He took out an apple and held it up so Pip could see it. Then Jake placed it on the ground and stepped back. Pip came forward and examined the apple. He took a bite and his eyes got very bright. He seemed to love the sweet taste. From that day on, Pip visited Jake every morning. Each time he stayed a little longer. At first he kept his distance and watched Jake work. But slowly, Pip began to come closer. Jake learned that Pip was very curious about everything. Pip would watch Jake use his tools and equipment. When Jake measured soil samples, Pip would lean in close to see what Jake was doing. When Jake recorded data on his computer, Pip would tilt his head and listen to the beeping sounds. One morning, Jake was playing music while he worked. It was an old song from Earth with a gentle melody. Pip became very excited when he heard it. He sat perfectly still and listened to every note. When the song ended, Pip made musical sounds that almost matched the rhythm. Jake played the song again and Pip tried to sing along. Jake realized that Pip understood music in a way that seemed impossible for an animal. He started playing different types of music to see how Pip would react. Pip liked soft melodic songs best. He would sway his small body and move his tail in time with the beat. After 2 weeks of daily visits, something special happened. Jake was working on a difficult repair job. An important machine had broken and Jake needed to fix it quickly. The work was frustrating and Jake was getting upset. Pip watched Jake struggle with the repair. Then Pip did something amazing. He walked over to Jake's toolbox and picked up a small screwdriver with his mouth. He brought it to Jake and dropped it next to the broken machine. It was exactly the tool Jake needed. Jake stared at Pip in shock. How did Pip know which tool would help? Jake had not asked for anything. Pip had simply watched the problem and found a solution. This was not lucky guessing. This was real thinking. Jake used the screwdriver to fix the machine. When he was done, he looked at Pip and said, "Thank you." Pip made a pleased sound and seemed to understand that he had helped. That afternoon, Jake cut his hand while working with sharp metal. Blood ran down his fingers and the cut hurt badly. Jake went to get his medical supplies, but Pip disappeared into the forest. Jake thought Pip had left because he was scared of the blood. But 15 minutes later, Pip returned. He carried green leaves in his mouth. Pip dropped the leaves near Jake and made urgent sounds. Jake recognized the leaves. They were from a plant he had studied. The plant had healing properties. Jake crushed the leaves and put them on his cut. The pain stopped almost immediately. By the next day, the cut was nearly healed. Pip had known exactly what Jake needed. He had gone into the forest, found the right plant, and brought it back. Jake was amazed by Pip's intelligence and kindness. As the weeks passed, Jake began talking to Pip like he would talk to a friend. Jake told Pip about his work, his life on Earth, and how lonely he felt on this distant planet. Pip always listened carefully. He would make soft sounds that seemed like responses. Jake told Pip about his family back on Earth. He missed his sister Lucy and his parents. He showed Pip pictures on his computer. Pip looked at each picture with great interest. When Jake showed him pictures of Earth's animals, Pip seemed especially curious about cats and birds. One morning, Jake made a discovery that changed everything. He was explaining his research to Pip, drawing diagrams in the dirt with a stick. Jake drew simple shapes to show how plants grew and changed. Pip watched Jake draw, then took the stick in his mouth. Carefully, Pip drew his own shapes in the dirt. But these were not random scratches. Pip drew perfect circles, triangles, and squares. Then he drew more complex patterns that showed mathematical relationships. Jake's heart raced. Mathematics was universal. If Pip understood math, it meant his intelligence was far beyond any animal Jake had ever known. Pip was not just smart. Pip could think in abstract concepts. Jake drew the number 1 in the dirt. Then 2, then 3. Pip watched carefully. Then Pip took the stick and drew 4, 5, and 6. The symbols were different from human numbers, but the pattern was clear. Pip understood counting. They spent the rest of the morning working with numbers and shapes. Pip learned quickly and seemed to enjoy the mental challenge. By the end of the session, they were working together on simple addition and subtraction. That evening, Jake sat in his station looking at the drawings in the dirt. He realized he was not dealing with an animal at all. Pip was an intelligent being from another species. This was first contact with alien intelligence. Jake felt excited and scared at the same time. This discovery could change human understanding of life in the universe. But it also meant Jake had a huge responsibility. How he handled this situation could affect the future of both species. Jake decided to keep learning about Pip before telling anyone else. He wanted to understand Pip better and build real communication between them. Jake sensed that Pip trusted him, and he did not want to break that trust. The next morning, Jake waited eagerly for Pip's visit. When Pip arrived, Jake had prepared new mathematical problems. But more importantly, Jake had decided to treat Pip as an equal, not as a subject to study. Jake pointed to himself and said clearly, "Jake Morrison." Then he pointed to Pip and waited. Pip made a series of musical sounds. Jake tried to repeat the sounds, but they were too complex for human vocal cords. Jake smiled and said, "I will still call you Pip, if that is okay." Pip seemed to understand and made a sound that seemed like agreement. Their friendship was becoming something deeper. It was becoming the first real communication between humans and another intelligent species. 2 months had passed since Jake first met Pip. Their daily meetings had become the best part of Jake's day. Using mathematics as their starting point, they had built a simple but effective way to communicate. Jake had created a system using numbers, shapes, and simple drawings. Pip learned quickly and added his own symbols to their shared language. They could now exchange basic ideas about objects, actions, and even feelings. One morning, Pip arrived with something unusual. He carried several small stones in a pouch that Jake had never noticed before. The pouch seemed to be made from plant fibers woven together. Pip had tools and could make things. Pip arranged the stones on the ground in a careful pattern. Jake watched, trying to understand what Pip was showing him. The stones were different sizes and colors. Pip placed them in a large circle with smaller circles inside. Suddenly, Jake understood. Pip was making a model of the solar system. The large yellow stone in the center was the sun. The other stones were planets in their correct positions. Pip even included the asteroid belt using tiny pebbles. Jake was amazed. The model was accurate down to the smallest details. Pip knew about astronomy and space, but how could a creature living in a forest know so much about the stars? Pip pointed to the third stone from the yellow sun and made questioning sounds. Jake realized Pip was asking about Earth. Jake nodded and said, "Earth, my home." Pip made understanding sounds. Then Pip pointed to the fourth stone and touched the ground beneath their feet. This was Kepler 442c, the planet they were on now. Pip was showing Jake that he understood where Jake came from and where they were now. Jake was so excited he could hardly contain himself. He ran to his station and brought back his computer. He showed Pip pictures of the solar system from Earth's astronomy files. Pip looked at each picture carefully, comparing them to his stone model. Then Pip did something that made Jake's hands shake. Pip took Jake's computer stylus and began drawing on the dirt with great precision. He drew star maps that showed constellations visible from this planet. But these were not maps Jake had ever seen. Pip was showing Jake how the stars looked from his perspective. This meant Pip's people had been studying astronomy for a long time. They had knowledge of space that humans did not possess. Over the following days, their communication grew more complex. Pip taught Jake words in his language, which Jake learned to call Kithara. The sounds were musical and beautiful, but very difficult for Jake to pronounce with his human voice. Jake learned that Pip's people called themselves the Kithara. The word seemed to mean those who sing to the stars. Pip explained, using their symbol system, that he was young by Kithara standards. He was chosen to watch the star travelers because he was curious about other forms of life. This revelation shocked Jake. Pip's people knew about humans and had been watching the research station. Jake was not discovering Pip. Pip was studying him. Jake asked why Pip had made contact when others had not. Pip's explanation, communicated through drawings and sounds, was touching. Pip said Jake seemed lonely and kind. Unlike other humans Pip had observed, Jake cared about the plants and animals around him. Jake did not hurt things unnecessarily. Pip showed Jake that the Kythera had been watching human activity on several planets. They were trying to understand what kind of beings humans were. Some Kythera thought humans were dangerous because they changed environments quickly and used resources heavily. But Pip argued that not all humans were the same. He had watched Jake work for months before making contact. Jake was different. Jake studied life without harming it. Jake seemed to understand that he was a guest on this planet. Jake felt the weight of responsibility. He was representing all of humanity to an alien species that was judging whether humans could be trusted. One day, Pip invited Jake to see something special. Using gestures and their shared symbols, Pip asked Jake to follow him into the forest. Jake hesitated. He had never left the area around his station with Pip before, but Jake trusted Pip, so he followed. They walked for about an hour through the purple trees. The forest was more beautiful than Jake had realized. Flowers glowed softly in the shadows. Small streams made musical sounds as they flowed over colored rocks. Pip led Jake to a hidden valley. When they emerged from the trees, Jake gasped. The valley was filled with structures that were clearly made by intelligent beings, but they looked like they had grown rather than been built. The buildings curved and twisted like living trees. They were made from materials Jake did not recognize, but they blended perfectly with the natural environment. Lights glowed gently from within the structures, powered by something that did not seem to harm the surroundings. Jake realized he was looking at a Kythera city. But it was unlike any city humans had ever built. This city worked with nature instead of replacing it. Plants grew on and through the buildings. Animals moved freely through the streets. Pip explained that this was just one small community. The Kythera had many cities across the planet, all hidden from human observation. They had technology that was far more advanced than human science, but they used it in ways that protected and enhanced the natural world. Jake saw other Kythera in the distance. They were larger than Pip, with bigger wings and more complex scale patterns. Some could clearly fly, gliding gracefully between the tree-like buildings, but they all kept their distance from Jake. Pip explained that his people were nervous about humans. They had seen what happened to other planets when humans arrived. Forests were cleared. Natural systems were disrupted. Wildlife was displaced, but Pip believed humans could learn to live differently. He had seen Jake's respect for life and his loneliness for companionship with other intelligent beings. Pip thought Jake could help both species understand each other. As they walked through the valley, Pip showed Jake wonders that made human technology seem primitive. Plants that cleaned water perfectly. Animals that had been enhanced to live longer and healthier lives but were still wild and free. Energy systems that drew power from sunlight and wind without any visible machinery. The most amazing thing was how everything worked together. Nothing was wasted. Every part of the Kythera society contributed to the health of the whole system. It was like the entire city was one living organism. When they returned to the research station that evening, Jake's mind was spinning. He had seen proof that intelligence could develop along completely different paths. Humans built by conquering nature. The Kythera built by partnering with it. That night, Jake faced the biggest decision of his life. Should he contact his superiors and report his discovery? Or should he continue learning from Pip and try to find a better way for the two species to meet? Jake looked out at the purple forest, knowing it hid an entire civilization. Somewhere out there, the Kythera were probably discussing what to do about the human presence on their world. Jake decided to trust Pip's judgment. He would continue building their friendship and learning about Kythera culture. When the time was right, perhaps they could find a way for humans and Kythera to meet as equals, not as conquerors and conquered. The future of both species might depend on the friendship between one lonely human scientist and one curious young Kythera who had chosen to bridge the gap between their worlds. 4 months had passed since Jake's first meeting with Pip. Their friendship had grown stronger every day, and their communication had become quite sophisticated. Jake could now understand many Kythera concepts, and Pip had learned enough English to express complex ideas. One morning, Pip arrived at the research station looking different. His usually calm demeanor seemed agitated. His scales shifted colors more rapidly than usual. Cycling through patterns Jake had learned, meant excitement mixed with worry. Using their established system of words, drawings, and gestures, Pip told Jake that something important was happening. The Kythera elders had been meeting for many days to discuss the human presence on their world. The meetings were not going well. Pip explained that the Kythera had been watching human expansion across the galaxy for several years. They had observed human colonies on dozens of planets. What they saw worried them greatly. The Kythera had witnessed humans strip mining entire moons. They had seen forests cleared in weeks that had taken centuries to grow. They had watched as human settlements expanded rapidly, pushing native life into smaller and smaller areas. Most disturbing to the Kythera was the human approach to other intelligent species. They had seen records of how humans dealt with beings they considered primitive. Even when humans tried to be kind, they often took control and changed everything to match human needs. The Kythera elders were divided into 3 groups. One group wanted to contact human authorities immediately and demand that all humans leave Kythera space. They believed humans were too dangerous to be allowed near Kythera worlds. A second group wanted to remain hidden and hoped the humans would eventually leave on their own. They thought contact of any kind was too risky. Better to stay secret and protect their civilization through concealment. The third group, smallest but growing, believed that contact might be possible under the right circumstances. They had been listening to Pip's reports about Jake with great interest. Pip told Jake that he had been sharing everything about their friendship with the elders. He described Jake's respect for the planet's ecosystem. He told them about Jake's loneliness and his genuine curiosity about other forms of life. He shared how Jake had never tried to capture or control him. Most importantly, Pip had convinced some elders that not all humans were the same. Jake represented a different possibility. If humans like Jake existed, perhaps the 2 species could find a way to coexist. But Pip also shared troubling news. The Kythera had been monitoring human communications. They knew that Jake's research mission would end in 2 months. When that happened, more humans would come to establish a permanent colony on the planet. The Kythera had technology that could hide their presence from human sensors, but a full colonial survey would eventually discover them. The decision about contact had to be made soon. Pip looked directly at Jake and asked a question that made Jake's heart race. Would Jake be willing to help arrange peaceful first contact between humans and Kythera? Jake felt the enormous weight of this request. He was just one person, a scientist with no political power. How could he possibly influence something as important as first contact between species? But as Pip continued explaining, Jake began to understand what the Kythera were offering. They possessed technologies that could revolutionize human civilization. They had solutions to problems that plagued every human world. The Kythera had developed clean energy systems that could power entire cities without environmental damage. They had medical knowledge that could extend human life and eliminate many diseases. They had agricultural techniques that could feed billions without destroying natural ecosystems. Most amazingly, the Kythera had perfected faster-than-light travel that used a fraction of the energy required by human warp drives. Their ships worked in harmony with space itself rather than forcing their way through it. All of this knowledge could be shared with humanity. But only if humans proved they could be trusted to use it wisely. Pip explained that the Kythera called their approach the harmony. It was a way of living that balanced the needs of intelligent beings with the health of the natural world. Several other alien species had joined the harmony over the centuries, but humans would be the first species invited to join, who had already developed space travel independently. This made the decision more complex. Humans had their own ways of doing things and might resist changing their approach. Jake spent hours asking questions and learning about Kythera society. He discovered that they had been spacefaring for thousands of years. They had made contact with 17 other intelligent species. Some contacts had gone well. Others had ended in conflict and tragedy. The Kythera had learned to be very careful about first contact. They studied new species for decades before revealing themselves. They looked for signs that a species could adapt to cooperative existence. Humans showed both promising signs and worrying ones. They were innovative and adaptable. They showed great courage in exploring space. Some humans demonstrated deep care for other forms of life, but humans also showed tendencies toward aggression and environmental destruction. They often acted first and considered consequences later. They had a history of conflicts even among their own species. Pip told Jake that his behavior over the past 4 months had been crucial evidence in favor of humans. Jake had proven that humans could form genuine friendships across species barriers. He had shown respect for alien intelligence and alien ways of life. But Jake was just one human. The elders needed to know if other humans could behave similarly. Pip presented Jake with a choice that would change everything. Jake could contact his superiors on Earth and try to arrange official first contact. But this approach was risky. Human governments might respond with military force or try to take control of Kythera technology. The alternative was for Jake to trust the Kythera completely. If Jake agreed, Pip would arrange for him to meet with the Kythera elders. They would evaluate Jake thoroughly. If they approved, they would reveal themselves to humanity on their own terms. This second option meant Jake would have to keep the secret a little longer. It also meant putting his career and reputation at risk. If things went wrong, Jake could be accused of hiding crucial information from humanity. Jake asked for time to think. That night he walked around his small research station, looking up at the stars. Somewhere out there was Earth, where billions of humans lived their lives unaware that they were being evaluated by an ancient alien civilization. Jake thought about what he had learned from Pip and the Kythera. Their way of life offered hope for problems that humans had been struggling with for centuries. Clean energy, sustainable growth, peaceful coexistence with nature. These were things humanity desperately needed. But the Kythera approach also challenged fundamental human assumptions about progress and control. Humans were used to taking charge and reshaping environments to meet their needs. The Kythera way required patience, cooperation, and respect for natural systems. Could humanity change? Could they learn to live differently? Jake believed the answer was yes, but only if first contact happened in the right way. By morning, Jake had made his decision. He trusted Pip and the Kythera wisdom. He would help arrange contact on their terms, not human terms. When Pip arrived for their daily meeting, Jake told him of his choice. Pip's scales shimmered with colors Jake had learned meant joy and relief. Pip told Jake that the elders would need several days to prepare for the meeting. During this time, Jake should continue his normal work and maintain regular communication with Earth. Nothing should seem unusual. As Pip prepared to leave that morning, he paused and looked at Jake with those golden eyes that had first captured Jake's attention. Using careful English words, Pip said, "Thank you, friend Jake. You help both our peoples find a better path." Jake watched Pip disappear into the purple forest, knowing that the next time he saw his friend, everything would be different. The future of human-Kythera relations rested on what would happen in the coming days. Jake waited 3 days for Pip to return. They were the longest 3 days of his life. He tried to continue his normal research routine, but his mind kept wandering to thoughts of the Kythera elders and their decision about humanity. On the 4th morning, Jake woke before dawn. Something felt different in the air. The usual forest sounds seemed quieter, as if the entire planet was holding its breath. Jake stepped outside his research station as the first light of dawn touched the purple trees. What he saw made him freeze in amazement. Pip was there, but he was not alone. Arranged in a wide semicircle around the research station were nearly 50 Kythera of all sizes and ages. Some were small like Pip, but others were magnificent creatures with wingspans that could cover a small aircraft. Their scales displayed colors Jake had never seen before. Deep purples that shifted to gold, silvers that became emerald green, and blues so pure they seemed to glow from within. At the center of the group stood the largest Kythera Jake had ever imagined. She was easily 3 times Pip's size, with scales that shimmered like starlight. Her wings were folded majestically against her back, and her presence radiated ancient wisdom and power. Jake's legs felt weak. He had known intellectually that Pip's people were intelligent, but seeing so many of them together was overwhelming. This was first contact with an entire alien civilization. Pip walked forward from the group. His scales showed the gentle colors that Jake had learned meant happiness and excitement. "Jake Morrison," Pip said carefully in English. "Meet my people, the Kythera. We come in peace and friendship." The largest Kythera stepped forward. When she looked at Jake, he felt a strange sensation in his mind, as if someone was gently touching his thoughts. Then clearly and directly inside his head he heard a voice. "Greetings, Jake Morrison of Earth. I am First Singer Vera. eldest of this community. Through young Pip's friendship with you, we have learned much about your kind. We thank you for the kindness you have shown to our little singer." Jake tried to speak but found his voice stuck in his throat. He was experiencing telepathic communication with an alien being. After a moment, he managed to say, "Thank you for trusting me with this meeting." Vera's mental voice carried warmth and gentle humor. "Trust is something that must be earned, young human. You have begun that process well, but today we must learn if that trust can extend to your entire species." Over the next several hours, Jake experienced the most important conversation in human history. The Kythera elders took turns communicating with him, sharing their knowledge and concerns about humanity. They showed Jake visions of human colonies they had observed. Some images were troubling: clear-cut forests, polluted rivers, and native species driven to extinction. But other images were hopeful: human scientists working to protect endangered animals, engineers developing clean energy, and children learning to care for their environment. Jake learned that the Kythera had been debating humanity's fate for months. The evidence was mixed. Humans showed great potential for growth and cooperation, but also dangerous tendencies toward destruction and domination. First Singer Vera explained their decision. The Kythera would offer humanity a choice. They would reveal themselves officially and invite humans to join what they called the Harmony, a confederation of species that shared technology and knowledge while maintaining their unique cultures. In exchange, humanity would need to agree to certain principles. Human expansion would become sustainable, working with natural systems rather than destroying them. Human technology would be redesigned to minimize environmental damage. Most importantly, humans would need to approach other species as equals, not subjects to be controlled. Jake asked what would happen if humanity rejected these terms. The answer was sobering. The Kythera would use their advanced technology to remain hidden. They would monitor human expansion and protect themselves as necessary. Humanity would continue developing alone, missing the chance to learn from thousands of years of Kythera wisdom. But Vera also shared something wonderful. If humanity accepted the invitation to join the Harmony, they would gain access to technologies and knowledge that could solve most of humanity's greatest problems. Clean unlimited energy, medical treatments that could extend healthy human life by centuries, agricultural techniques that could feed billions while restoring damaged ecosystems. Most amazingly, the Kythera would share their faster-than-light travel technology. Human exploration of the galaxy could continue, but in ways that did not harm the worlds they discovered. Jake was chosen to be humanity's first ambassador to the Kythera. He would help facilitate the official first contact and serve as a bridge between the two species during the difficult adjustment period. The formal contact would happen in 2 weeks, when the next human supply ship arrived at Jake's research station. The Kythera would reveal themselves to the ship's crew and begin official diplomatic relations. Jake asked why the Kythera were willing to take such a risk with humanity. Vera's answer touched his heart deeply. "Because young Pip convinced us that humans are capable of great friendship and growth. In 4 months you showed him kindness, respect, and genuine care for life different from your own. If one human can do this, perhaps your species can learn to do it as well." Pip came forward and stood next to Jake. "You were lonely, friend Jake. So was I. Now neither of us needs to be lonely anymore. Our peoples can be friends together." As the sun climbed higher, the other Kythera began to disperse back into the forest. But several remained, including some young ones who seemed curious about Jake and his equipment. First Singer Vera approached Jake one final time. "The path ahead will not be easy, Jake Morrison. There will be humans who fear us and Kythera who doubt you. But friendship like yours and Pip's shows us that cooperation is possible." She paused and looked at the research station, then at the purple forest around them. "This planet will become the first world where humans and Kythera live together as equals. What we build here will serve as an example for both our species." Jake felt the weight of responsibility, but also tremendous hope. He looked at Pip, his small friend who had started this incredible journey with simple curiosity and courage. "What happens now?" Jake asked. Pip's scales shimmered with happy colors. "Now we work together, Jake. We show both our peoples that different kinds of intelligence can create something better than either could build alone." Over the following days, Jake worked with Pip and several other young Kythera to prepare for official first contact. They designed communication protocols and planned demonstrations of Kythera technology that would amaze, but not frighten the arriving humans. Jake also sent carefully worded reports to Earth, preparing his superiors for the most important discovery in human history. He emphasized the peaceful nature of the contact and the incredible opportunities it represented. When the supply ship arrived 2 weeks later, everything changed. The crew's amazement at meeting the Kythera quickly turned to excitement as they learned about the technologies and knowledge being offered. 6 months later, Jake stood in a beautiful building that perfectly blended human engineering with Kythera biotechnology. Outside, he could see human children and young Kythera playing together in gardens that showcased the best of both species' approaches to life. Jake had become Earth's official ambassador to the Kythera, but more importantly, he remained Pip's closest friend. Together, they were planning their next adventure, a joint exploration mission to discover other intelligent species that might be ready to join the growing harmony. Jake watched the sunset paint the sky in colors that reminded him of Kythera scales. He reflected on how much had changed. A lonely scientist and a curious young alien had become the foundation for a friendship between species that would reshape the galaxy. The roaming Dragonling had brought his whole herd, just as Jake had dreamed, and together they were building a future neither species could have imagined alone.